"Replay camera 12, the man in the black suit said quietly. And that was the moment my life changed without me even knowing it. By the third night, the concrete floor beneath the parking garage no longer felt cold. That scared me more than anything. Human beings weren't supposed to get used to sleeping under fluorescent lights with their 5-year-old daughter curled against their chest like a frightened kitten. But exhaustion changes the rules. Lily slept with her tiny fingers wrapped in the fabric of my sweater, her breathing uneven from the winter cough she'd been fighting for almost 2 weeks. I pulled my coat tighter around her shoulders, even though my own hands were trembling from the cold. Somewhere above us, New York kept moving. Expensive heels crossed marble floors. Elevator doors opened and closed. Men with money discussed things that people like me were never invited to hear. But down there in the underground parking levels of the Moretti Financial Tower, nobody noticed a homeless woman sleeping beside Pillar C-12. At least, that's what I thought. My phone had died sometime around midnight. Not that it mattered. There was nobody left to call anyway. The shelter on 48th was full. The motel owner had locked us out after I missed 2 nights of payment. My ex-husband had disappeared 3 months ago, along with the child support money he kept promising would come next week. And the hospital bills sitting inside my tote bag felt heavier than bricks. Lily stirred in her sleep and pressed closer to me. "Mommy," she whispered weakly, her voice raspy. "I'm cold." "I know, baby." I kissed her hair. "Just sleep a little longer." My eyes burned from staying awake too long. I kept forcing myself not to fall asleep completely, because parking garages at 3 in the morning weren't safe places for women alone with children. Every sound made my heartbeat jump. Tires rolling across concrete, distant footsteps, elevator chimes. Somewhere nearby, a car door shut softly. Then silence, the kind that makes you aware of your own breathing. I looked up too late to see the security guard standing 10 feet away near the black elevator doors. He wasn't alone. 2 men in dark suits stood behind him, perfectly still, hands folded in front of them like statues carved from expensive stone. The older guard looked uncomfortable, nervous even. His flashlight lowered slightly when he noticed Lily asleep in my arms. "Ma'am," he said gently, "you can't stay here." Shame crawled up my throat so fast it almost choked me. I nodded immediately, already trying to gather our blanket and bag before he could call the police. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "We'll leave." But the men behind him didn't move. One of them lifted his hand to an earpiece, listening to someone speaking softly through static. His expression changed almost instantly. Not fear exactly, respect. The kind, powerful men only showed to one person. Then he looked directly at me before speaking into the microphone near his collar. "Sir," he said quietly, "the single mother is still here, and the little girl's asleep in her arms." A pause, long enough for the entire garage to feel colder somehow. Then the elevator doors opened behind them, and every man in the room straightened at once. The man who stepped out of the elevator looked nothing like the people I was used to seeing at 3 in the morning. He moved slowly, calmly, like the entire building belonged to him and always would. Tall, dark wool coat, black gloves, expensive shoes that barely made a sound against the concrete floor. The silver lights above us reflected against the sharp lines of his face. But it was his eyes that made my stomach tighten. Cold green. Focused. The kind of eyes that noticed everything. Every guard in the garage straightened the second he appeared. Nobody spoke. Nobody even breathed too loudly. I pulled Lily closer against my chest and forced myself to stand, even though my legs felt weak from exhaustion. "Sir," the older guard said carefully. "I told them they had to leave." The man did not answer right away. His attention settled completely on Lily instead. on her sock-covered feet peeking out beneath my coat, on the faded backpack beside us, on the pharmacy bag half open near the blanket. His jaw tightened slightly, barely noticeable, but enough to make the men around him lower their eyes. "How long?" he asked quietly. The guard swallowed. 3 nights that we know of. 3 nights. Hearing someone else say it out loud made humiliation burn through me hotter than the cold ever could. I cleared my throat quickly. "I'm sorry," I said before anyone could threaten us again. We never touched anything. We just needed somewhere warm for a few hours. His gaze shifted to me for the first time fully, and I suddenly understood why powerful men frightened people without raising their voices. There was no cruelty in his face. Somehow that made it worse. "What is your name?" he asked. "Claire." My voice cracked from exhaustion. "Claire Bennett. And your daughter Lily." At the sound of her name, Lily stirred weakly against my shoulder. Her pale face pressed into my neck, cheeks flushed from fever. The man noticed immediately. Of course he did. Men like him probably noticed everything. He removed one black leather glove slowly before crouching down in front of us. The movement startled the guards more than it startled me. Powerful men were not supposed to kneel on cold garage floors for people like us. Lily blinked sleepily at him, confused and shy. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wrapped chocolate bar. Expensive. The kind sold in hotel gift shops for ridiculous prices. "Can she eat this?" he asked me. I nodded carefully. Lily stared at the chocolate for a long moment before taking it with tiny, trembling fingers. "Thank you," she whispered. His expression changed then, just slightly, like something inside him had caught off guard. One of the guards stepped closer. "Mr. Moretti, your call with Chicago is waiting upstairs." Damian Moretti did not even look away from my daughter. "Tell Chicago to wait." Then his eyes lifted back to mine, steady and unreadable. "You are not sleeping in this garage tonight." Claire, I should have said no. Every survival instinct I had told me men like Damian Moretti never did favors without expecting something in return. Men with expensive watches and private security did not stop their meetings at 3 a.m. because a homeless woman and her child were cold. But Lily was burning up in my arms, and I had not slept more than 4 hours a total in 3 days. Pride felt a lot less useful when your daughter had a fever. "We cannot afford a room," I admitted quietly. The words tasted bitter coming out of my mouth. Damien studied me for another long second before standing again. He was even taller up close. The guards around him moved instantly the second he shifted, like satellites adjusting around gravity. "Nobody asked you to," he said calmly. One of the younger guards stepped toward us with obvious hesitation. "Sir, should I call doctor?" Kaplan Damien's eyes never left Lily. "Have him meet us upstairs." Upstairs. The word alone made panic crawl through my chest. People like me did not go upstairs in buildings like this unless we were cleaning them. "Listen," I said quickly, tightening my hold on Lily. "I appreciate whatever this is, but we are fine. We will leave. You are shivering. It is December in Manhattan." Something almost invisible flickered near the corner of his mouth. Not quite amusement, more like disbelief that I still had enough energy left to argue with him. Behind him, the elevator doors remained open silently, warm golden light spilling across the concrete floor. Lily coughed weakly against my shoulder. That sound broke whatever stubborn resistance I still had left. Damien noticed the exact moment I gave up fighting. Of course he did. He stepped aside slightly and held one gloved hand toward the elevator without touching me. "Come upstairs." "Claire." His voice stayed low and steady. Just for tonight. The ride to the penthouse level was so quiet, I could hear the soft hum of the cables above us. I stood near the back corner, clutching Lily while the guards faced forward like statues. Damien remained beside the control panel, scrolling through messages on his phone with one hand. Calm and unreadable, as though bringing strangers into private elevators at 3 a.m. was completely normal for him. The doors finally opened into another world. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows glowing with city lights, fresh white flowers on a black table bigger than my old apartment kitchen, somewhere deeper inside the penthouse. Jazz music played softly through hidden speakers. I froze instantly. My worn sneakers left damp marks against polished stone worth more than everything I owned combined. This is too much, I whispered before I could stop myself. Damien removed his coat slowly, handing it to one of the guards without looking away from Lily. No, he said quietly. Too much was a child sleeping in my garage while half this city wasted food upstairs. Then he turned toward a woman approaching from the hallway in medical scrubs. Check the little girl first, he ordered softly. And somebody bring them something warm to eat. The doctor's name was Kaplan. Mid-50s. Gray hair. Calm eyes that looked genuinely kind, which somehow made me trust him less at first. Nobody in Damien Moretti's world was probably allowed upstairs without a reason. Lily sat wrapped in a thick cream-colored blanket on a white leather couch, while Dr. Kaplan checked her temperature and listened to her breathing. I stayed close enough to touch her the entire time. 101, he said gently after checking the thermometer. Nothing severe, but she is exhausted and dehydrated. Dehydrated. Shame twisted inside me again because I knew exactly why. We had been stretching one bottle of water and vending machine snacks for almost 2 days. Doctor. Kaplan looked toward Damien. She needs rest. Warm food, antibiotics if the cough gets worse. Damien nodded once. Handle it. That was all. 2 words, quiet, controlled. Yet somehow everybody moved immediately when he spoke. One guard disappeared toward the kitchen. Another stepped aside to make a phone call. Even the doctor packed his equipment faster. I stood there frozen beside the couch while Lily slowly sipped warm soup someone had placed in front of her. Real soup. Steam rising gently into the air. The smell alone nearly broke me. I had spent the last 6 months pretending everything was temporary. Temporary debt. Temporary eviction notices. Temporary nights sleeping in my car before the towing company took it last week. But standing inside that penthouse with city lights stretching endlessly behind glass walls taller than church windows, I suddenly realized how tired I actually was. There is a guest suite prepared, Damien said from across the room. He had loosened his tie slightly, though somehow he still looked impossibly put together. You and Lily can sleep there tonight. My grip tightened around the paper cup in my hands. We cannot stay. His eyes lifted slowly from the phone resting in his palm. You keep saying that because it is true. I forced myself to meet his gaze even though it felt like standing too close to something dangerous and expensive. People like you do not help people like me for free. Silence settled across the room instantly. One of the guards shifted uncomfortably near the doorway. Damien just watched me for a long moment. Unreadable. Then he placed his phone face down on the marble counter beside him. And what kind of person am I? Claire. The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. Because honestly, I did not know. Rich. Obviously. Powerful enough that grown men straightened when he walked into a room. Dangerous, maybe. But none of that explained why he had stopped a meeting in the middle of the night, because a sick little girl was sleeping in his garage. Lily looked up sleepily from the couch. Mommy, she whispered softly. The soup tastes like Grandma's. My throat tightened instantly. My mother had been gone 4 years. Damien noticed the exact second my eyes filled with tears, because of course he did. He turned away immediately afterward, giving me privacy I had not even realized he was offering. "Nobody is asking for repayment tonight," he said quietly, without looking back at me. "Just let your daughter sleep somewhere warm." I woke up because I could not remember where I was. For one terrifying second, I thought Lily and I had somehow wandered into somebody else's apartment by mistake. The bed beneath me felt too soft. The air smelled faintly like cedar wood and clean laundry instead of concrete and car exhaust. Pale morning light spilled through enormous windows overlooking Manhattan, painting gold across white walls and dark furniture that looked untouched, almost too perfect to belong to real people. Then I felt Lily sleeping beside me under thick blankets, warm for the first time in days, and everything came rushing back. Damien Moretti, the garage, the penthouse. I sat up too quickly, panic tightening my chest. People like me did not wake up in rooms that probably cost more per night than my monthly salary used to. My eyes immediately found our bags near the doorway exactly where I had left them. Nobody had touched our things. That detail unsettled me more than if they had. A quiet knock sounded against the suite door before it opened slowly. A woman stepped inside carrying a tray with coffee, fruit, and fresh clothes folded neatly beside it. She looked to be in her early 60s with silver hair twisted into an elegant bun and kind brown eyes that studied me carefully without judgment. "Good morning, Miss Bennett," she said softly. "I am Rosa, Mr. Moretti asked me to check on your daughter." I tightened slightly at his name. Even saying it silently inside my head felt dangerous somehow. Rosa noticed my hesitation immediately. "You do not need to be afraid here," she said gently. I almost laughed at that. Afraid was the only sensible thing I had felt since stepping into this building. Lily stirred beside me, rubbing sleep from her eyes. The second she noticed the tray, her entire face changed. "Strawberries," she whispered in awe. "Real strawberries in December. Bright red and perfect. The kind sold in expensive grocery stores downtown, where I used to avoid looking at prices because it only reminded me how far behind I had fallen." Rosa smiled softly and handed Lily a warm mug of hot chocolate. "Slowly, sweetheart. It is still hot." I watched my daughter take careful little sips while color slowly returned to her cheeks, and something painful tightened behind my ribs. Children should not look surprised to wake up warm and fed. Rosa quietly adjusted the blanket around Lily before turning toward me again. "Mr. Moretti already left for meetings this morning," she said. "But he asked me to tell you there is no rush." Of course there were meetings. Men like Damien probably controlled entire cities before breakfast. I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug she handed me, trying not to notice how badly they shook. "Why is he doing this?" I asked finally. Rosa paused near the doorway. For the first time since entering the room, her expression changed slightly. Not fear exactly. Something closer to careful respect. "Mr. Moretti notices things other people ignore," she said quietly, "especially children." Then she left before I could ask anything else. I looked down at Lily curled beneath expensive blankets drinking hot chocolate with sleepy little smiles, and for the first time in months, the future scared me almost as much as hope did. By noon, I still had not seen Damien again. Somehow that made his presence feel even larger inside the penthouse. Men in dark suits moved quietly through hallways speaking into earpieces. Expensive phones vibrated against marble counters. Twice. I heard someone mention his name in low, careful voices before instantly stopping when they noticed me nearby. It felt less like staying in somebody's home and more like standing inside the center of a storm everyone else understood except me. Lily sat cross-legged near the enormous living room windows, coloring in a sketchbook Rosa had found for her. The city stretched behind her in silver winter light, endless and sharp. "Mommy," she said softly without looking up, "are we rich now?" The question hit me so hard I had to turn away for a second. Children noticed things adults tried to hide. The hunger, the fear, the difference between surviving and living. I forced a smile anyway. "No, sweetheart." My voice came out thinner than I wanted. "We are just resting here for a little while." Lily nodded seriously, like she understood more than a 5-year-old should. Then she went back to coloring tiny flowers across the page with careful concentration. Around 2 in the afternoon, my phone finally charged enough to turn back on. The second the screen lit up, dread settled heavily in my stomach. 8 missed calls, 3 voicemail notifications, 1 text message from my former landlord. I opened that one first, because fear had trained me to expect the worst. Instead, I stared at the screen in confusion. "Mrs. Bennett, there appears to have been a misunderstanding regarding your lease situation. Your remaining balance has been cleared. You may retrieve your belongings at your convenience." I read it 3 times, then a 4th. My hands slowly tightened around the phone. Cleared. That was impossible. I barely had $20 left in my checking account. Another message appeared while I was still staring. This one from the pediatric clinic that had been threatening to cancel Lily's follow-up appointments. "Your daughter's account has been updated. Please contact us to reschedule treatment." A cold wave moved down my spine. Too fast. Everything was happening too fast. Rosa noticed my expression from the kitchen doorway. "Is something wrong?" she asked gently. I looked up immediately. "Who paid my bills, Slintz?" Just 1 second of it, but that second told me enough. Rosa lowered her eyes slightly before continuing to dry the coffee cups in her hands. "Mr. Moretti takes care of problems he considers unacceptable." My heartbeat quickened instantly. "I did not ask him to do that, no." Rosa agreed softly. "That is why he did." I stood abruptly from the couch, panic and anger tangling together inside my chest. Because kindness from powerful men always came with strings. Maybe not immediately, maybe not visibly, but eventually. "Where is he?" I asked. Rosa hesitated. "Meeting downstairs." Before she could stop me, I was already moving toward the elevator with my pulse hammering too loudly in my ears. Because suddenly the warm blankets, the paid bills, the careful kindness all felt dangerous in a completely different way. And for the first time since entering Damien Moretti's world, I was not afraid of losing everything. I was afraid of owing him. I found Damien in a conference room 3 floors below the penthouse, surrounded by screens full of numbers and men who looked expensive enough to own islands. The second I stepped through the glass doors, the room went completely silent. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A man near the projector immediately lowered his voice and stepped back like I had interrupted something dangerous. Damien sat at the far end of the black marble table with one hand resting near a glass of untouched espresso. Dark suit, silver watch, calm expression. Somehow he looked even colder in daylight. His eyes lifted toward me slowly, and every person in the room seemed to wait for his reaction before breathing again. "Claire," he said evenly, "you should not be down here. You paid my bills. I did not care that 20 strangers were watching us. Fear and humiliation had burned through too many layers inside me already. You had no right." Nobody moved. One man near the windows quietly closed a laptop and slipped from the room without permission being given. Damien remained completely still. "Leave us," he said softly. Chairs shifted instantly. Within seconds, The massive conference room emptied until only the two of us remained beneath the glow of city light reflecting against glass walls. I crossed my arms tightly just to stop my hands from shaking. I never asked for charity. Damien stood slowly from his chair. No. He agreed calmly. You asked for nothing while your daughter slept in a parking garage. That does not mean you get to control my life. Something sharp flickered behind his eyes at the word control. Gone almost immediately. If I wanted control, Claire, he said quietly, you would know. The room suddenly felt too small, too warm. I hated how steady his voice stayed while mine threatened to crack apart. People do not spend this kind of money without expecting something back. He studied me for a long moment before walking toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Hands in his pockets. Perfect posture. Like a man carrying the weight of entire cities without letting it touch his shoulders. Do you know what I saw on those security cameras? He asked softly. I stayed silent. A little girl trying to pretend she was not cold because she did not want her mother to cry. His words hit harder than shouting ever could. And I saw a woman apologizing for surviving. I looked away immediately because somehow that was worse than anger. Being seen always was. Damien turned back toward me slowly. You think this is about debt because that is how the world has treated you. His voice lowered further. But not everything is a transaction. Before I could answer, the conference room doors opened slightly, and Lily peeked inside holding her sketchbook against her chest. Mommy, she asked nervously. Then she noticed Damien standing beside the windows. For a second she just stared at him with serious little eyes. You look sad today, she whispered softly. Silence. Real silence. Damien froze completely. Not dramatic, not obvious. Just one still moment where something inside that powerful, dangerous man seemed to stop moving altogether. And for the first time since meeting him, I saw something in Damien Moretti that had nothing to do with money or fear. Loneliness. Lily's words stayed in the room long after she said them. You look sad today. Simple, honest. The kind of truth only children were brave enough to speak out loud. Damien looked at her for several quiet seconds before crouching slightly to her height again. Do I? He asked softly. Lily nodded with complete seriousness. A little. I expected him to dismiss it. Powerful men usually laughed off vulnerability like it was weakness. Instead, Damien surprised me again. Maybe I am tired, he said gently. Lily considered that carefully before holding out her sketchbook toward him. Drawing helps me when I feel sad. My breath caught slightly watching the scene unfold in front of me. The most intimidating man I had ever met standing in a glass conference room worth millions of dollars, while a 5-year-old offered him crayons like peace offerings. Damien accepted the sketchbook carefully, almost awkwardly, as if nobody had handed him something innocent in a very long time. He stared down at the page filled with flowers and crooked little stars. These are good, he said quietly. Lily smiled for the first time since we arrived at the tower. Not polite, not forced. Real. It changed her whole face. Something shifted in Damien's expression when he saw it. Softened, maybe, just for a second. Then the conference room doors opened suddenly, and one of the guards stepped inside with visible hesitation. Sir, he said carefully. There is an issue downtown. Damien's entire posture changed instantly. The warmth disappeared beneath cold composure so fast it almost felt unreal. Outside, he said without raising his voice. The guard nodded immediately, but stopped himself before leaving. It involves Russo. The name landed heavily in the room, even though I had no idea who Russo was. Damien's jaw tightened once, barely noticeable. But enough. Now. he repeated quietly. The guard disappeared at once. I looked between them uneasily. For the first time since arriving, reality slipped through the cracks of this strange kindness surrounding us. Damien Moretti was not just wealthy. Men with private security and whispered meetings never were. He noticed my expression immediately. Claire. His voice lowered, controlled again. Take Lily upstairs. Who is Russo? The question escaped before I could stop it. Silence. Damien held my gaze steadily for a long moment before answering. Somebody you do not need to worry about? That was not an answer, and we both knew it. Lily tugged lightly on my sleeve. Mommy. I looked down at her small face and suddenly understood something terrifying. I had started feeling safe here. Safer than I had felt in months, maybe years. But safety built around powerful men came with shadows attached to it. Damien stepped aside near the doorway to let us pass first. The movement was respectful, careful, yet somehow it still carried the quiet authority of someone used to controlling every room he entered. As I walked past him, holding Lily's hand, my shoulder brushed lightly against his sleeve. Warm, steady, dangerous. And when the elevator doors closed between us seconds later, I realized something that frightened me more than sleeping in that garage ever had. Part of me did not want to leave. Snow started falling just after midnight. Thick white flakes drifted past the penthouse windows, softening the sharp edges of Manhattan until the city looked almost unreal. Lily had finally fallen asleep, curled beside me on the couch with her sketchbook still resting against her chest. But I could not sleep at all. Too many thoughts, too many questions, and somewhere deep inside me, a feeling I did not trust. I stood quietly near the windows, staring down at the streets, almost 80 floors below, when the elevator doors opened behind me. I knew it was Damien before I even turned around. The room changed when he entered it. His tie was gone now. Dark hair slightly disheveled like he had been running his hands through it for hours. Exhaustion shadowed his face beneath the calm expression he wore for everyone else. He loosened the cuffs of his shirt slowly as he walked toward the bar near the windows. You are awake, he said quietly. So are you. Something tired almost resembled a smile at the corner of his mouth. Almost. He poured himself a glass of water instead of whiskey, which somehow surprised me more than it should have. Silence settled between us comfortably for the first time since we met. Snow drifted quietly outside. Lily breathed softly behind us beneath warm blankets. It felt strangely peaceful for two people standing inside the center of a world built on power and secrets. Rosa told me you have not stopped working all day, I said carefully. Damien stared down at the city lights below before answering. There is always something demanding attention. Even at midnight, his eyes shifted toward me then. Green, heavy, honest in a way they had not been before, especially at midnight. I looked away first, because the longer he held eye contact, the harder it became to remember all the reasons I should stay afraid of him. I should leave tomorrow, I whispered finally. The words hurt more than they should have. Damien did not react immediately. He just stood there with one hand resting lightly against the glass beside him while snow fell silently over Manhattan. If that is what you want, he said at last. No argument, no pressure. Somehow that made my chest ache unexpectedly. You already did too much for us. Claire. My name sounded different when he said it softly like that. Taking care of a child should not feel extraordinary. Emotion tightened suddenly in my throat. Maybe because he believed that. Maybe because so few people ever had. Behind us. Lily stirred sleepily beneath the blankets. Damien walked over instinctively and adjusted the coat that had slipped from her shoulders. His coat. black wool folded carefully around a little girl who trusted him completely after only 2 days. The sight hit me harder than anything else had. This dangerous, powerful man moving quietly so he would not wake a child. Damien looked down at Lily for a long moment before speaking again, his voice low enough that it almost disappeared beneath the sound of the falling snow. The world failed both of you long before you walked into my garage. Then he straightened slowly and looked at me with an expression I would remember for the rest of my life. You do not owe me for kindness, Claire. Outside the windows, Manhattan glittered cold and endless beneath the storm, but standing there beside Damien Moretti, for the first time in years, I no longer felt invisible.